What if I told you that America's most dangerous criminal drives a city bus? Bills scattered across a cramped kitchen table. 20s, 50s, hundreds. More cash than most people see in a lifetime. Weathered hands sort through stack after stack, methodical as a bank teller. A refrigerator hums too loudly in one corner. Mexican soap operas flicker on a television screen that's seen better decades. This modest apartment tells a story of someone living paycheck to paycheck. Faded linoleum. Second-hand furniture. Walls that have absorbed 12 years of quiet desperation. But those stacks of money? They don't belong in this world. $112 million. That's what vanished from one of America's most ruthless cartels. Not by some criminal mastermind with connections and firepower. Not by an elaborate crew with military precision. By someone you've probably never noticed. How many invisible people do you pass every day? Coffee shop workers who memorize your order but whose names you never learn. Maintenance crews who clean your office building while you sleep. Bus drivers who transport you safely through traffic while you stare at your phone, completely unaware of their existence. Society trains us not to see certain people. We look through them, past them, around them. Service workers become background noise in our daily lives. But what happens when one of those invisible people decides to step out of shadows? This is a story about how being nobody became perfect cover for crime. About a man who spent 12 years being systematically ignored by everyone around him, until that invisibility became his greatest weapon. Eduardo Morales drove Route 47 through Tucson's industrial district. Same schedule, same stops, same passengers for over a decade. Reliable. Quiet. Forgettable. His colleagues at Transit Authority knew him as someone who never caused problems, never complained, never drew attention. What they didn't know was that Eduardo spoke 4 languages fluently, held an accounting degree from Universidad de Guadalajara, and possessed a photographic memory that could catalog every detail of conversations people assumed he couldn't understand. Hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible. Because sometimes being overlooked is exactly what you need to pull off an impossible heist. Sometimes being underestimated gives you access to secrets worth more than most people earn in several lifetimes. But can you really disappear with $112 million? Can someone who spent years being nobody suddenly become someone who outsmarts federal investigators and vanishes without leaving a trace? Route 47 still runs through Tucson today. Different driver now. Same schedule, same stops, same passengers who barely glance up from their phones. But what that previous driver accomplished during his final week on job has become legend among those who know where to look. Money doesn't just vanish. People don't simply disappear. Yet somehow, both happened on one October night when a bus driver decided to stop being invisible. 5:30 a.m. Alarm clock breaks silence in a studio apartment that costs $800 a month. Same routine for 4,380 days. Shower. Instant coffee. White button-down shirt pressed every Sunday for an entire week. Keys to bus 2847. Desert sunrise painted Tucson's industrial district in shades of amber and rust. Factory smokestacks pierced morning sky like concrete fingers. Warehouses stretched endlessly between railroad tracks and interstate overpasses. This wasn't tourist Arizona. No golf courses or luxury resorts here. Just honest work for honest wages. Route 47 began at Central Transit Station and wound through neighborhoods most residents preferred to forget existed. Early morning passengers climbed aboard with lunchboxes and thermos bottles. Hospital cleaners finishing night shifts. Restaurant workers heading to prep kitchens. Factory employees starting another day on assembly lines. Each face told a story of early mornings and tired evenings. Eduardo knew their patterns better than they knew themselves. Maria from pediatric intensive care always sat 3 rows back, left side. She'd worked double shifts for 6 months saving money to bring her sister north from Sonora. Carlos, who smelled perpetually of fryer oil, had been washing dishes at same family restaurant for 15 years while studying English at community college. Nobody talked to their bus driver beyond polite greetings. Why would they? Service workers existed to perform functions, not engage in conversation. Eduardo had learned this lesson early in his career. Passengers wanted reliable transportation, not friendship. Perfect invisibility requires more than just being ignored. It demands active participation in your own erasure. Speak only when spoken to. Smile without making eye contact. Exist without taking up space that others might notice. But invisibility has advantages that most people never consider. Eduardo listened to everything. Phone conversations conducted in Spanish because passengers assumed their driver couldn't understand. Business discussions held in hushed English because who pays attention to someone operating a vehicle? Personal confessions shared between friends because public transportation creates temporary intimacy among strangers. For languages flowed through his consciousness like radio stations. Spanish from childhood in Guadalajara. English perfected through night school classes. Portuguese learned from Brazilian co-workers at a previous job. Italian acquired during 2 years spent working restaurant kitchens after college. College. Universidad de Guadalajara, class of 1995. Accounting degree earned with honors while working construction jobs to pay tuition. Financial statements, tax codes, profit margins, numbers that revealed secrets hidden in plain sight. But economic collapse had made that education worthless. Mexican peso devaluation wiped out opportunities overnight. Immigration to United States followed desperation, not ambition. Bus driving paid enough to survive. 12 years of survival had somehow become 12 years of invisibility. Memory retained everything. Conversations overheard 6 months ago remained crystal clear. License plate numbers spotted once never faded. Bank account details mentioned casually during phone calls stayed permanently archived. Photographic recall had been both blessing and curse since childhood. Remembering everything meant forgetting nothing, including daily reminders of what life had become. Tucson's industrial district harbored secrets in every warehouse and loading dock. Night businesses that operated without proper signage. Parking lots filled with expensive vehicles during supposedly slow hours. Security patterns that didn't match legitimate operations. Eduardo noticed everything because noticing had become survival skill. Which buildings received deliveries during unusual hours? Which companies employed people who dressed too well for their supposed salaries? Which operations generated enough cash flow to justify armored car visits twice weekly? Pattern recognition came naturally to someone trained in accounting. Numbers should add up. When they didn't, someone was hiding something worth hiding. Frustration accumulated like interest on unpaid debt. Watching passengers who earned more in single weeks than he collected monthly. Listening to conversations about vacation plans while calculating whether groceries would last until next paycheck. Being intellectually capable of so much more while society had decided his worth based on job title alone. Intelligence without opportunity becomes dangerous. Education without application breeds resentment. Skills without recognition can transform into weapons. Route 47 ended each day at Desert Palms Industrial Complex. Final stop before returning to depot. Most passengers had already disembarked by then, leaving Eduardo alone with thoughts that had been building for over a decade. Desert Palms Industrial Complex sprawled across 40 acres of concrete and corrugated steel. Warehouse after warehouse stretched toward distant mountains, each building supposedly housing legitimate businesses. Auto parts distributors. Restaurant supply companies. Import operations specializing in everything from textiles to electronics. But legitimate businesses don't require employees who carry designer handbags worth more than most annual salaries. Warehouse 14C bore a faded sign reading, Hermanos Distribution Center, Import-Export Services. Generic enough to avoid questions. Vague enough to cover almost any activity. 3 passengers rode Route 47 to this final stop every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Roberto always claimed front seat, nervous energy radiating from hunched shoulders. Fingers constantly moved, counting something invisible, tapping rhythms that matched his rapid heartbeat. Cheap cologne couldn't mask anxiety sweat that had become his permanent fragrance. Conversations with other passengers never lasted long. Roberto preferred silence broken only by muttered calculations under his breath. Ana dressed like someone attending corporate meetings, not warehouse shifts. Tailored blazers, leather briefcases, shoes that cost more than most people spent on groceries monthly. Phone calls dominated her bus rides, Conversations conducted in hushed tones that suggested sensitive business discussions. She spoke carefully, choosing words like someone who understood consequences of saying too much. Diego wore confidence like expensive jewelry, literally. Gold chains caught fluorescent lighting every time he moved. Designer watches marked time during phone conversations that grew louder and more animated with each passing week. Money problems plagued his discussions, but not from lacking funds. His complaints centered on logistics, timing, coordination between multiple parties. July heat made bus windows impossible to open, trapping conversations inside metal container rolling through industrial district. Eduardo had learned to drive while appearing completely absorbed in traffic patterns, creating illusion of inattention that encouraged passenger indiscretion. Diego's mistake came during particularly scorching evening when temperature inside bus reached uncomfortable levels. Frustration boiled over during phone call conducted in rapid Spanish, volume rising with his irritation. Phoenix crew keeps missing schedules, Diego complained loudly. Transport timing gets worse every week. How do we move product through back corridors when federal agents watch main routes constantly? Spanish conversation continued for 20 minutes, covering details about shipping schedules, security rotations, and cash transfers between facilities. Diego assumed his bus driver couldn't understand words flowing freely between phone and ear. Wrong assumption. 3 weeks later, Anna's leather portfolio remained on seat after her stop. Professional briefcase, monogrammed with initials that matched expensive business cards Eduardo had glimpsed during previous rides. Company policy required turning lost items into transit authority office, where they'd remain unclaimed for months before being discarded. Eduardo took it home instead. Spreadsheets inside revealed sophisticated operation moving massive amounts of cash between Arizona, Nevada, and various points south. Money laundering schemes detailed with accounting precision that spoke to Eduardo's educational background. Transportation schedules, security protocols, facility layouts. Information worth more than gold to someone who understood its implications. But transportation schedules caught his attention immediately. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, while Eduardo drove Route 47 through Industrial District, armored vehicles moved between Warehouse 14C and storage facility in Phoenix. Timing wasn't coincidental. Regular bus schedule provided perfect cover for money transport operations, giving anyone monitoring area logical explanation for vehicle movement. Eduardo spent following month documenting everything. Which vehicles entered complex during evening hours? When security guards changed shifts? How long loading procedures typically required? His bus driver knowledge of area traffic patterns, camera locations, and police patrol schedules suddenly became invaluable intelligence. Observation revealed operations rhythm. Monday deliveries. Tuesday and Thursday transfers. Friday collections. Security made rounds every 2 hours with mathematical precision. Loading dock faced away from main road, hidden from casual observation. Money staging area remained consistently located in same climate-controlled room. Most importantly, alarm system protecting that room had been installed in 2019 by company whose default security codes Eduardo found documented online. Manufacturer documentation provided everything needed to disable protection temporarily without triggering alerts. Roberto's nervous energy made perfect sense once Eduardo understood what those counting motions represented. Anna's expensive wardrobe reflected profits from operation that generated more weekly revenue than most businesses earned annually. Diego's gold chains were just visible tips of financial iceberg. Comment below. What would you do if you found that portfolio? October conversation changed everything. Roberto mentioned quarterly transfer, scheduled for late month. Accumulated cash from 3 months of operations would move in single night. Numbers he whispered during nervous calculations finally made sense. Over $100 million. Single shipment. One night. Eduardo had driven past this opportunity for 2 years without recognizing what waited behind warehouse doors. Now he understood why expensive cars filled parking lots during supposed off hours. Why security seemed excessive for import business. Why employees dressed like executives rather than warehouse workers. Quarterly transfer represented lifetime of bus driver salaries moving through facility Eduardo knew better than anyone else involved. October 23rd marked Eduardo's first sick day in 3 years. Transit Authority accepted his call without question. Reliable employees earn trust that becomes their greatest asset. While bus 2847 remained parked at depot, its usual driver sat in stolen maintenance vehicle outside warehouse 14C, wearing coveralls that transformed him into another invisible worker. Preparation had consumed months. Commercial moving truck acquired through classified ad, complete with legitimate decals and paperwork that would survive casual inspection. Maintenance coveralls purchased from Uniform Supply Company. Tools and equipment that made him look like any overnight service contractor. Most importantly, Eduardo had studied facility patterns until security rotations became predictable as sunrise. Guards changed shifts at midnight. Patrol rounds occurred every 2 hours. Loading dock remained unmonitored between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. during skeleton crew hours. Money staging room occupied northwest corner of building, accessed through service entrance that cleaning crews used nightly. Eduardo had watched those crews for weeks, timing their movements, learning their routines, understanding how invisible workers navigated secure facilities. Being nobody had taught him how others achieved invisibility. 1:47 a.m., security guard completed first patrol. 2 hours until next round. Eduardo approached service entrance using same route cleaning crews followed. Maintenance coveralls and confident stride suggested legitimate business. Nobody questioned workers who belonged. Alarm system documentation downloaded from manufacturer website provided everything needed. Default codes unchanged since installation. Disable sequence required exactly 90 seconds to execute without triggering backup alerts. Eduardo's photographic memory retained every step. 1:52 a.m. Service door opened silently. Interior hallways dimly lit by emergency lighting. Facility layout memorized from months of observation guided steps toward northwest corner. No security cameras monitored this corridor, cost-cutting measure that would prove expensive. Climate-controlled room contained exactly what intelligence suggested. Military-style transport cases stacked against far wall. Each case secured with combination locks whose numbers Eduardo had observed during previous surveillance. Roberto's nervous finger movements hadn't been random counting. They'd been lock combinations repeated unconsciously. 2:17 a.m. First case opened. Bundles of cash packed with vacuum-sealed precision. Hundreds, 50s, 20s. Currency from street-level operations converted into transportable wealth. Weight distribution calculated beforehand allowed Eduardo to load efficiently without exceeding truck capacity limits. Moving $112 million requires understanding physics as much as courage. Each bundle weighed approximately 1 pound. Total cargo approached 2 tons. Commercial truck could handle load, but weight distribution affected handling characteristics. Eduardo had practiced driving similar loads during preparation phase. Loading proceeded with methodical efficiency. Case after case emptied into truck bed. Eduardo's accounting background helped him estimate totals. This wasn't random grabbing, but calculated extraction based on observed patterns. Security would discover theft regardless of amount taken. Might as well take everything. 2:43 a.m. Halfway through loading process. Sweat despite cool October air. Every sound seemed amplified in empty warehouse. Footsteps from distant corridors. Mechanical hum from climate control systems. Heartbeat that threatened to alert anyone within hearing distance. But warehouse remained empty except for Eduardo and enough cash to retire several generations. Psychology of invisibility worked both ways. If you're trained not to see certain people, you become vulnerable to those same people seeing you. Hermanos operation had spent years teaching everyone to ignore service workers, maintenance crews, overnight contractors. That trained blindness created opportunity. Eduardo had been invisible to these people for 2 years. They'd never looked directly at him, never acknowledged his presence beyond necessary interaction. Bus driver existed to provide transportation, nothing more. Service worker uniform made him equally forgettable. 3 a.m. Final case loaded. Truck bed filled with enough money to purchase small countries. Eduardo sealed cargo area. Checked weight distribution one final time. Vehicle handled differently with 2 tons of additional mass, but within acceptable parameters. Service entrance secured. Alarm system reactivated using same manufacturer codes. No evidence of entry except missing money that wouldn't be discovered until morning shift arrived. By then, Eduardo would be hundreds of miles away. Interstate 19 stretched north toward Phoenix, then beyond. Speed limit became religion during first hour of escape. Overloaded truck attracted enough attention without adding traffic violations. Eduardo maintained exactly posted speeds while calculating distance between himself and discovery. 3:47 a.m. First checkpoint passed. Way station closed for overnight hours. State Police Patrol spotted but showed no interest in commercial vehicle traveling lawful speeds. Nothing about Eduardo's appearance or behavior suggested criminal activity. That's when emotional payoff hit. Not celebration, too early for that, but recognition that plan had worked. Months of observation, weeks of preparation, years of being systematically ignored had culminated in one perfect night. 4:23 a.m. Phoenix city limits. Eduardo stopped at 24-hour truck stop for fuel and coffee. Paid cash like any independent contractor managing operating expenses. Attendant barely glanced up from magazine. Another invisible worker conducting routine business. Truck contained more money than most banks held in their vaults. Eduardo looked like someone earning minimum wage plus tips. 5:15 a.m. Sunrise painted Arizona desert in familiar colors. Eduardo had driven this route countless times during bus career, but never with cargo worth more than most companies' annual revenue. Never with freedom measured in hours rather than years. Radio news mentioned no unusual activity in Tucson. Discovery wouldn't happen for several hours. Eduardo had time to reach predetermined location where truck would be abandoned and transformation would begin. From bus driver to ghost in less than 4 hours. From Eduardo Morales to someone else entirely. From invisible worker to invisible criminal. Money changes everything except human nature. Eduardo remained careful, methodical, patient. Same qualities that made him successful bus driver now made him successful thief. Speed limits stayed sacred. Traffic laws became commandments. Nothing about his behavior suggested anything unusual had occurred. By 6 a.m., Eduardo was drinking coffee at roadside diner, looking like any other tired trucker starting long haul. Waitress refilled his cup without making eye contact. Kitchen staff ignored him completely. Still invisible. Now wealthy beyond imagination. Eduardo Morales died at 7:23 a.m. in a roadside diner outside Flagstaff, Arizona. Not literally, but officially, permanently, completely. Coffee grew cold as transformation began in restaurant bathroom where trucker mirrors reflected someone about to cease existing. Hair dye changed brown to salt and pepper gray. Contact lenses shifted dark eyes to hazel. Mustache disappeared with careful razor work. Designer glasses replaced weathered features with scholarly appearance. Posture straightened from bus driver's hunch to businessman's confidence. Ricardo Vásquez emerged from that bathroom, retired import executive who'd spent successful career building legitimate businesses throughout Central America. His documentation stretched back 15 years through meticulously crafted paper trails. Bank accounts in 3 countries. Social media profiles showing gradual transition from active businessman to comfortable retiree. Property records in Costa Rica dating back 5 years. Creating false identity required more than fake documents. It demanded constructing entire fictional life with verifiable details that could withstand investigation. Eduardo had spent months building Ricardo's history, using accounting skills to create financial records that told consistent story of gradual wealth accumulation through legitimate business ventures. Misdirection operated on multiple levels simultaneously. While law enforcement searched for bus driver who'd suddenly acquired massive wealth, Ricardo enjoyed morning coffee as someone who'd earned retirement through decades of hard work. His money came from selling successful import business to larger corporation. Transaction documented with contracts, tax records, and bank transfers that predated theft by months. Costa Rica offered perfect refuge for wealthy retirees seeking tropical paradise. Established expatriate community meant another North American with comfortable finances attracted no attention. Property purchased years earlier through Shell Corporation provided residents with complete backstory. Neighbors knew Ricardo as quiet businessman who'd been planning retirement moves since purchasing land. Banking systems in Costa Rica, Panama, and Belize had received gradual deposits over 18 months preceding theft. Money laundered through series of investment vehicles that converted stolen cash into legitimate assets. Real estate purchases, commodity investments, offshore trust structures. Eduardo's accounting education proved invaluable for understanding how large sums could disappear into legal financial instruments. But hiding $112 million requires more than offshore accounts. Physical currency needed conversion into forms that couldn't be traced back to original source. Eduardo had established relationships with precious metals dealers, art collectors, and luxury goods brokers who asked few questions about cash transactions. Swiss banks accepted wire transfers from Ricardo's established accounts without scrutiny. Cayman Islands trusts held investments purchased through legitimate financial advisors. Singapore property markets absorbed millions through real estate transactions that appeared routine to authorities focused on drug money rather than theft proceeds. Subscribe if you want to hear more impossible crimes. Meanwhile, Hermanos Cartel faced impossible situation that grew worse with each passing hour. Reporting theft to authorities meant exposing entire operation to federal investigation. Admitting security failure meant acknowledging organizational weakness to competitors who watched for opportunities. Explaining how bus driver had penetrated their defenses meant accepting that someone they'd never noticed had outmaneuvered supposedly sophisticated criminal enterprise. Internal investigation yielded nothing useful. Security footage showed maintenance worker entering facility, but face remained hidden beneath cap and coveralls. Service entrance logs indicated routine overnight work order that appeared legitimate until money disappeared. Guard rotations had proceeded normally without suspicious activity reported. Most frustrating was complete absence of leads pointing toward inside help. Roberto, Ana, and Diego underwent extensive questioning that revealed nothing beyond normal operational procedures. Nobody had noticed anything unusual about their bus driver. Why would they? Service workers existed in background of their daily lives. Cartel restructured entire operation within weeks. New facilities, randomized schedules, enhanced security measures that assumed enemies might be hiding among invisible workforce. But changes came too late to prevent loss that threatened organizational stability. Money represented 3 months of accumulated profits from multiple revenue streams. Street-level drug sales, protection rackets, human trafficking operations, all feeding into central repository that Eduardo had emptied in single night. Cash flow disruption forced painful adjustments throughout criminal enterprise. Federal investigation began when suspicious financial activity triggered automated monitoring systems designed to detect money laundering. But by then, Ricardo Vásquez was establishing new routine in Central American paradise, enjoying morning coffee while reading international newspapers on veranda overlooking Pacific Ocean. Weather in Costa Rica remained perfect year-round. Golf courses stayed green regardless of season. Expatriate community welcomed another successful retiree seeking peaceful lifestyle away from stressful business world. Eduardo Morales had vanished completely, leaving no trace except empty apartment and abandoned bus route. Ricardo Vásquez lived comfortably on legitimate retirement income, his past verified through documentation that satisfied even careful scrutiny. Perfect crime requires perfect disappearance. Both had been achieved through months of careful planning and years of being systematically underestimated by everyone around him. Agent Patricia Herrera had solved bank robberies, drug trafficking networks, and kidnapping cases that made national headlines. 23 years with Federal Bureau of Investigation had taught her that criminals always leave traces. Digital footprints, financial records, human connections that eventually lead to arrests. Eduardo Morales left nothing. 3 days after theft, suspicious financial activity alerts triggered automated systems designed to catch money laundering operations. By then, trail had already grown cold. Security footage from border crossings showed someone matching Eduardo's description crossing into Mexico on foot with tourist documentation. After that checkpoint, complete silence. No financial transactions under his name. No communication with former associates. No digital presence whatsoever. Eduardo had simply ceased existing in any traceable way. Herrera's investigation team reconstructed timeline with forensic precision. Sick day called at 5:47 a.m. on October 23. Warehouse security breach occurred between 1:50 and 3 a.m. same night. Border crossing captured on camera at 4:23 p.m. following day. Professional execution that suggested either extensive criminal experience or exceptional intelligence. Neither profile matched municipal bus driver with clean record and steady employment history. Transit authority colleagues described Eduardo as reliable, quiet, unremarkable. Apartment search revealed modest lifestyle consistent with his salary. Bank records showed regular deposits matching paycheck amounts, routine expenses, occasional money transfers to relatives in Mexico. Nothing indicated hidden wealth or criminal connections. Most frustrating aspect was sophistication level demonstrated by whoever executed this theft. Alarm systems disabled professionally. Security patterns exploited with surgical precision. Escape route planned with understanding of law enforcement response procedures. This wasn't amateur hour, yet amateur seemed like only logical suspect. Border surveillance footage became obsession for Herrera's team. Enhanced images, facial recognition software, behavioral analysis experts, all focused on figure crossing into Mexico with papers identifying him as tourist visiting family. But tourist documentation led nowhere. Name on passport belonged to identity that existed only on paper. Sightings began within weeks and continued for years. Bus driver in Guatemala who resembled photos. Tourist in Belize asking detailed questions about local transportation systems. Man in Panama who paid for everything with cash and spoke multiple languages fluently. Each lead consumed resources and produced nothing concrete. 3 years of investigation yielded impressive collection of false positives and dead ends. Eduardo Morales had become ghost story within federal law enforcement. Case that demonstrated how someone could vanish completely if they planned carefully enough. Herrera kept case file on her desk despite official status changing to inactive. Younger agents learned about Eduardo during training sessions as example of perfect disappearance. How ordinary person could outmaneuver entire federal investigation through superior preparation and ruthless execution. We're hunting criminal mastermind, Herrera often explained to trainees, but suspect was just guy who paid attention. That attention to detail had allowed Eduardo to identify opportunity, exploit weaknesses, and vanish before anyone realized what happened. Systematic underestimation by everyone around him became his greatest tactical advantage. Hermanos Cartel's response proved more dramatic than federal investigation. Entire operational structure underwent complete overhaul within months. Warehouse 14C remained empty, lease terminated without explanation. Transportation schedules became randomized, eliminating predictable patterns that Eduardo had exploited. Security measures expanded exponentially. Background checks for all service workers. Surveillance systems monitoring areas previously considered safe. Protocols assuming potential threats might hide among invisible workforce that Cartel had previously ignored completely. Cost of Eduardo's theft extended far beyond missing money. Organizational paranoia infected every aspect of operations. Trust disappeared between management levels. Efficiency suffered as security concerns dominated decision-making processes. Other criminal organizations took notice. If municipal bus driver could penetrate Hermanos' defenses and vanish with their money, what did that suggest about supposed sophistication of cartel operations? Reputation damage proved almost as expensive as financial loss. Herrera understood human cost of being professionally outsmarted. Sleep lost over cases that remained unsolved. Confidence shaken by criminals who demonstrated superior planning skills. Career satisfaction diminished when obvious suspects proved untouchable. Eduardo Morales had achieved something remarkable in law enforcement circles. Perfect crime that left investigators with nothing except grudging respect for its execution. Most dangerous criminals are ones society trains itself not to see. Eduardo's story reveals uncomfortable truth about human nature. We systematically ignore people whose jobs make them invisible. Service workers become background noise in our daily lives. We interact with them functionally while remaining completely unaware of their intelligence, education, or capabilities. That blindness creates vulnerability. Every day, invisible people observe our routines, listen to our conversations, and access our private spaces. Hotel housekeepers who clean executive suites. Uber drivers who transport business leaders to confidential meetings. Restaurant servers who overhear merger discussions. Security guards who patrol corporate facilities after hours. We assume these workers lack education or ambition to threaten our interests. We speak freely around them because their presence doesn't register as significant. We grant them access to sensitive areas because their invisibility makes them seem harmless. Eduardo possessed university education, spoke 4 languages, and maintained photographic memory. Yet for 12 years, passengers treated him like an automated system designed to transport them safely between destinations. Nobody considered that their bus driver might be cataloging their conversations, analyzing their business patterns, or planning to exploit information gained through systematic observation. Power of patience cannot be understated. Eduardo spent 2 years watching Hermanos operation before acting. 2 years of careful documentation. 2 years of studying security protocols. 2 years of building trust through reliable service while gathering intelligence that would eventually destroy his targets. Modern world creates countless opportunities for patient observation. Digital communications leave electronic trails that skilled individuals can interpret. Social media reveals personal information that criminals use for targeting victims. Online banking exposes financial patterns that fraudsters exploit systematically. Who's watching you right now? Which invisible people have access to your personal information? How many service workers observe your daily routines without your awareness? What conversations have you conducted around people whose intelligence you've never considered? Underestimating others based on job titles or economic status represents a dangerous form of intellectual arrogance. Eduardo's accounting degree meant nothing to passengers who saw only bus driver. His linguistic abilities remained hidden from people who assumed service workers couldn't understand sophisticated conversations. His memory skills went unrecognized by individuals who never bothered learning his name. Society's class-based blindness enabled perfect crime because nobody imagined that municipal employee could outmaneuver federal investigators and international criminal organization. Systematic underestimation became Eduardo's greatest weapon against targets who trained themselves not to see him clearly. Modern implications extend beyond criminal activity. Artificial intelligence systems, surveillance networks, and data collection operations function through similar invisibility. We interact with monitoring systems daily without considering who controls that information or how it might be used against our interests. Technology has created new categories of invisible watchers: algorithms that analyze our behavior, cameras that track our movements, systems that profile our preferences. We've become comfortable with electronic observation while remaining blind to human observation occurring simultaneously. Share this video if it made you look at people differently. Route 47 still runs through Tucson's industrial district today. Different driver operates bus 2847 now. Same schedule, same stops, same passengers who barely acknowledge their transportation provider. Morning commuters climb aboard while checking phones, completely absorbed in digital lives that prevent them from noticing physical world around them. Current driver appears reliable, quiet, professional. Transit authority colleagues describe him as someone who shows up on time, follows procedures, causes no problems. Passengers appreciate punctual service without considering who provides it. But nobody knows what this new driver thinks about during long hours behind wheel. Nobody knows his educational background, language skills, or memory capabilities. Nobody knows whether he's listening to conversations, observing patterns, or planning something that would surprise everyone who's learned not to see him. After all, most dangerous criminals are ones society trains itself not to see.